The American lieutenant stops mid-step. His boot hovers above the forest floor. Something is wrong. He scans the dense Philippine jungle. Nothing, no movement, no sound, just thick vegetation pressing in from all sides. Behind him, 24 U.S. Army soldiers freeze. They have been in these jungles for 3 days, soaked by rain, bitten by insects, lost twice, exhausted, and they still have not spotted a single Filipino instructor. Then the voice comes, soft, almost a whisper, from less than 5 meters away. You have been flanked. Your entire patrol is dead. The American spins. There, standing between two trees, a Filipino Scout Ranger, camouflage paint covering his face, vegetation woven into his uniform. He has been there the whole time, watching, waiting, invisible. The lieutenant did not see him. None of his men saw him. And this Filipino soldier is only one of 12 who have been shadowing the American patrol for 3 hours. Undetected, within killing range. That moment in 2023 at Fort Magsaysay changed how the United States Army trains for jungle warfare. Because what Filipino Special Forces demonstrated in those jungles forced American commanders to rethink everything they thought they knew about forest combat. And now, 5 specific Filipino tactics are being taught at U.S. military schools worldwide. This is not theory. This is hard-won knowledge from a nation that has been fighting in jungles for over a century. The Philippines has 7,000 islands. Most are covered in tropical rainforest, dense, humid, deadly. For over 100 years, Filipino soldiers have been fighting in these jungles against Spanish colonizers, against American forces during the Philippine-American War, against Japanese invaders in World War II, against communist insurgents for decades, against Islamic militants in Mindanao. Every conflict taught lessons. Every battle refined techniques. By the 21st century, Filipino jungle warfare doctrine was among the most advanced in the world, but nobody outside the Philippines paid much attention. Western militaries focused on desert warfare, urban combat, high-tech solutions. Jungle training was considered secondary, a niche skill, not a priority. Then the strategic environment shifted. China became more aggressive in the Pacific. Territorial disputes intensified. Military planners realized future conflicts might happen in Southeast Asian jungles. Islands, coastal forests, environments where technology advantages diminish. Where soldiers must rely on fieldcraft, where the side that understands the jungle wins. Suddenly, Filipino expertise mattered, and the United States military wanted to learn. Exercise Balikatan happens every year, a joint military exercise between American and Filipino forces. For decades, it focused on conventional warfare, large unit maneuvers, combined operations, standard training. Then in the late 2000s, American special operations planners requested something different. They wanted jungle-specific training, not classroom instruction, not theoretical discussion, actual field training in real jungle, from soldiers who actually fought there. The Filipinos agreed, and that is when American soldiers discovered how much they did not know. The first courses were humbling. Sirwa, U.S. Army Rangers, considered among the best light infantry in the world, struggled with basic jungle movement. They made noise. They got lost. They could not find water. They exhausted quickly in the heat and humidity. Filipino instructors half their size moved through the same terrain silently, efficiently, seemingly without effort. The gap was obvious, and the Americans wanted to close it. Tactic number 1 is called ghost walking. This is not just moving quietly. Every soldier learns noise discipline. But Filipino ghost walking is different. It is a specific method of movement through dense vegetation that leaves almost no trace and makes virtually no sound. The technique starts with footwear. Filipino soldiers often remove their boots in certain terrain. Bare feet or thin sandals provide better ground feel. They sense branches before stepping on them, feel roots that might shift and crack. Western soldiers trained to always wear boots thought this was insane, until they tried it. The difference was immediate. The foot placement is deliberate, never the heel first. That creates impact noise. Always the outside edge of the foot, rolling inward, distributing weight gradually, testing the ground before committing. If something shifts, the foot pulls back, tries again elsewhere. Progress is slow, sometimes incredibly slow, but it is silent. The body position matters. Bent at the waist, knees flexed, weight forward. This lowers the center of gravity, reduces silhouette, allows faster reaction if you start to fall. Arms extended forward, feeling for vines and branches before your body reaches them. Parting vegetation slowly, never pushing through. And that makes noise and leaves obvious trail. U.S. Army instructors watched Filipino soldiers demonstrate this technique, then watched American soldiers try it. The Americans sounded like elephants. They improved with practice, but it took weeks to develop even basic proficiency. Filipino soldiers had been practicing since childhood, playing in jungles, hunting. It was natural to them. For Americans, it had to be learned consciously, deliberately, repeatedly. Tactic number 2 is Indigenous Camouflage Integration. Western militaries use printed camouflage uniforms, designed in laboratories, tested in controlled conditions, effective in many environments. But in dense jungle, Filipino soldiers do something else. They become part of the jungle. The technique starts before entering the forest. Filipino instructors teach soldiers to study the specific environment they will operate in. What plants are present, what colors dominate, what textures. Every jungle is different. Luzon forests look different from Mindanao forests. The wet season creates different vegetation than the dry season. You cannot use one camouflage pattern for everything. Once in the jungle, soldiers gather local materials, leaves, vines, mud, small branches. These are attached to uniforms and equipment, not randomly, deliberately, matching the layers of the jungle. Lower vegetation for lower parts of the body, canopy materials for upper body and head. The three-dimensional effect breaks up the human outline completely. American soldiers initially resisted this. Their uniforms already had camouflage patterns. Why add more? Then Filipino instructors conducted a simple demonstration. They positioned a Filipino soldier and an American soldier 10 meters apart, both wearing standard camouflage, both in the jungle. Observers 20 meters away identified the American immediately, could not locate the Filipino for several minutes, even when looking directly at him. The lesson was clear. Printed camouflage helps. Local vegetation integration makes you invisible. Tactic number 3 is minimal equipment movement. Western Special Forces carry sophisticated gear. Night vision, GPS communications equipment, advanced weapons, all necessary, all heavy. Filipino soldiers operating in jungles for weeks at a time discovered that weight kills. Not from enemy action, from exhaustion, heat injury, inability to move silently. The Filipino approach is ruthlessly minimalist. Soldiers carry only what they absolutely need for the specific mission. Nothing extra. No comfort items. No just-in-case equipment. If you do not need it in the next 72 hours, you leave it behind. This requires different thinking. Western soldiers are trained to be prepared for anything. Filipinos are trained to adapt to anything. The difference is subtle but important. A prepared soldier carries equipment for multiple scenarios. An adaptive soldier develops skills to handle scenarios with whatever is available. Filipino instructors teach water procurement from vines and bamboo, fire starting with bamboo friction, shelter construction from palm fronds, food gathering from edible plants. These skills allow soldiers to survive with almost nothing. American soldiers initially struggled with this concept. When they were trained on equipment, dependent on it, the idea of operating with just a rifle, ammunition, and knife felt dangerous. Filipino instructors demonstrated otherwise. They conducted week-long patrols with minimal load, remained combat effective, maintained health and hydration, moved faster and more quietly than fully loaded troops. The Americans learned, not by lecture, by doing. After a week carrying full combat loads in tropical heat, they understood why minimal movement mattered. Tactic number 4 is jungle-specific communication. Radio communications in dense jungle are difficult. Vegetation blocks signals. Terrain creates dead zones. Trying to establish comms can compromise your position. Filipino Special Forces developed alternative methods. Hand signals were adapted for jungle environments. Different than open terrain signals, designed to be seen through vegetation, using movement and contrast rather than specific hand positions. Sound signals using natural noises, bird calls, insect sounds, tapping patterns on wood. These blend into the jungle ambient noise. Only trained ears recognize them as communication. Physical markers left on trails, broken twigs in specific patterns, rocks arranged in certain ways, mud markings on trees. These tell following friendly forces about enemy positions, dangers, directions, without leaving obvious signs that enemies would recognize. The most sophisticated technique is personal recognition at close range. Filipino soldiers train to identify individual team members by silhouette, movement pattern, and breathing rhythm. This allows them to operate in visual contact without verbal confirmation. In darkness or heavy vegetation, you know who is next to you by how they move, how they breathe. Small details that become familiar through hundreds of hours of shared operations. U.S. Special Forces recognized the value immediately. They had similar techniques, but Filipino methods were more refined, more natural. Developed through decades of actual combat rather than training exercises, American instructors began incorporating these methods into Scout Sniper schools, Special Forces qualification courses, Ranger School, teaching the next generation of U.S. soldiers how to communicate like Filipino jungle fighters. Tactic number 5 is combat tracker team operations. Tracking is ancient. Reading signs. Following trails. All militaries teach basic tracking. Filipino combat tracker teams operate at a completely different level. As they do not just follow tracks, they read the jungle like a book. Every broken twig tells a story. Every disturbed leaf provides information. Tracks reveal numbers, equipment, condition, and intent. Filipino trackers can determine how many people passed, how long ago, whether they were carrying heavy loads, whether they were moving tactically or casually, whether they knew they were being followed. This information allows small Filipino teams to track and ambush much larger enemy forces. The technique combines visual tracking with environmental awareness. A tracker does not just look at the ground, he reads the entire environment. Displaced morning dew, disturbed spider webs, vegetation that has been brushed aside, mud on rocks near stream crossings. Each sign adds to the picture. The psychological component is critical. Filipino trackers understand how people think in the jungle, where they rest, how they navigate, what mistakes they make. This allows trackers to anticipate movement, set ambushes, intercept rather than just follow. American forces had combat tracker programs, but they had atrophied. Decades of technology dependence degraded field skills. Filipino instructors helped rebuild these programs, not with classroom instruction, with field work, walking trails, reading sign, developing the eye for details that most soldiers miss. Marine Corps Scout Sniper instructors called Filipino tracking methods the most advanced they had encountered, better than anything taught at U.S. schools. Now those methods are part of U.S. curriculum, taught to soldiers who may never deploy to the Philippines, but who might fight in jungles elsewhere. Vietnam, Thailand, or Indonesia, Central America, Africa. Anywhere vegetation grows thick and technology advantages disappear, the impact of these 5 tactics extends beyond individual skills. They represent a philosophical shift. For decades, American military doctrine emphasized technological superiority, advanced equipment, precision weapons, sensor networks. This works in many environments, but jungles expose the limits. Dense vegetation degrades GPS accuracy. Humidity damages electronics. Canopy blocks satellite communications. Visual sensors cannot penetrate the green. In that environment, the side with better field skills wins. Filipino methods prove that human skills still matter, that low-tech techniques developed through experience can defeat high-tech solutions. With that understanding, your environment matters more than bringing equipment to dominate it. U.S. Army Jungle Operations Training Course completely redesigned their curriculum after observing Filipino instruction methods. They incorporated all 5 tactics: extended course duration, increased field time, reduced classroom time. The results were measurable. Graduates performed better in subsequent deployments, made fewer mistakes, adapted faster. The transformation was not limited to Army. Navy SEALs requested Filipino instructors for jungle phase training. Marine Raiders incorporated Filipino methods into reconnaissance courses. Air Force Pararescue added jungle-specific modules based on Filipino techniques. By 2024, every U.S. Special Operations Unit had integrated some element of Filipino jungle warfare doctrine. The broader implications matter. The Pacific is becoming the central strategic theater for American military planning. China's growing assertiveness creates potential for conflict in literal Southeast Asian environments. Island chains, coastal jungles, riverine deltas, places where heavy mechanized forces cannot operate, where air power is limited by weather and terrain, where small units of highly skilled infantry become decisive. If that conflict comes, American soldiers will fight in jungles similar to those in the Philippines. They will need the skills Filipino soldiers have refined over a century of forest warfare. The partnership between U.S. and Filipino forces is not charity, not one-sided assistance to a smaller ally. It is mutual benefit. Americans bring resources, technology, and different operational experiences. Filipinos bring unmatched jungle expertise. Together, they create capabilities neither could develop alone. The relationship has evolved. 50 years ago, Americans trained Filipinos, taught them American methods. Now Filipinos train Americans, share their methods. The student has become the teacher. This is acknowledged openly. U.S. Special Operations Command Pacific publicly credits Filipino forces as among the most capable jungle fighters in the world. RAND Corporation studies document how Filipino tactics improved American counterinsurgency operations. Military journals publish articles analyzing Filipino small unit techniques. The recognition is deserved, earned through blood and experience, through decades of fighting in conditions that would break most armies. For the individual soldiers who go through this training, the experience is transformative. An American Ranger who completed the Filipino-led jungle course at Fort Magsaysay described it as harder than anything at Ranger School. Not physically harder, mentally harder. You learn how little you know, how much you have relied on technology and equipment rather than skills, how vulnerable you are when those things fail. Then you start learning, slowly, painfully. You learn to move silently, to see what you missed before, to read the environment, to trust your senses more than your gear. By the end, you understand why Filipino soldiers can operate for weeks in jungles with almost nothing. Because they have developed skills most modern soldiers have lost. The humility is important. American military culture sometimes assumes superiority, better funding, better equipment, therefore better soldiers. So training with Filipinos dispels that assumption, shows that expertise comes from experience, that small, poor armies can develop capabilities that large, rich armies lack, that there is always something to learn if you are willing to be a student. The tactical applications are immediate and practical. American Special Operations teams deploying to Southeast Asia now request Filipino instructors as advisors, not as subordinates, as experts. Filipino Scout Rangers have deployed with U.S. forces as combat advisors, providing real-time guidance during operations, reading terrain, identifying trails, predicting enemy movement. Their presence improves American effectiveness measurably. Mission success rates increase, casualties decrease. The investment in learning Filipino methods pays immediate dividends. Beyond Southeast Asia, these techniques apply anywhere jungles exist. Central America, South America, parts of Africa. Even temperate forests share some characteristics with tropical jungles. The principles transfer: minimal movement, environmental integration, sound discipline, tracking. These work in any forest environment. Soldiers trained in Filipino methods perform better in all woodland operations. The U.S. Army now considers jungle training essential for all light infantry, not just special operations. Regular infantry battalions rotate through jungle courses, learn basic Filipino techniques, build fundamental field skills. The institutional commitment reflects recognition that future warfare might not accommodate American technological preferences, that soldiers need skills that work when everything else fails. The Filipino soldiers who teach these courses take pride in the work. They are not just instructors, they are ambassadors for their nation's military expertise. They demonstrate that the Philippines contributes to collective defense in meaningful ways. That Filipino forces bring more than token numbers to alliances. They bring expertise, capability, skills that matter. This recognition strengthens the bilateral relationship, creates respect between professional soldiers, builds bonds that transcend politics. An American officer who trained with Filipino instructors said it simply: "They taught me how to survive, how to fight, how to win. In environments where my previous training was inadequate, I owe them my life. Maybe the lives of soldiers I will someday lead." That is not exaggeration. That is statement of fact. Those sentiments are repeated by hundreds of American soldiers, NCOs officers, who went through Filipino jungle training and came out better, more capable, more humble, more prepared. The lessons learned in Philippine jungles are now being taught at Fort Benning, Fort Bragg, the Jungle Operations Training Course in Hawaii, across the U.S. military training system. 5 Filipino tactics: ghost walking, indigenous camouflage, minimal equipment movement, jungle communication, combat tracking. These are now part of American military doctrine, taught to thousands of soldiers every year, spreading expertise developed in Philippine forests across the entire U.S. military. That is how 5 Filipino tactics change U.S. Special Forces training forever. Not through formal agreements or institutional mandates, through demonstrated superiority, sure, through proven effectiveness, through soldiers teaching soldiers. The way real military knowledge has always been passed down, in the field, under trees, from those who know to those who need to learn. The partnership continues. Every year, more American soldiers train with Filipino instructors. Every year, the techniques are refined, adapted, improved, but the core remains. Filipino jungle warfare doctrine built through a century of forest combat, tested in real operations, proven effective, now shared with allies, making both nations stronger, more capable, more ready for whatever challenges the future brings.